Hello, this is Sergio Morero. Today we're here at RBL1 Live with Clint Chao. He is general partner of Moment Ventures, an early stage venture fund focused on B2B investments. So thank you for joining us, Clint.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Of course. So Clint is a veteran in the space, and he's based in Palo Alto. Has been working on Moment Ventures, the co-founder of Moment Ventures, for 7 years. So he'll talk about why he started it as we go, and they've invested in great companies such as Alto and Stripe. And Pod Foods and the like, and then also a graduate of University of California, Berkeley, studied engineering back in the day. So has been in the deep in the Valley scene. So thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you for having me.
And turning it over to you, can you share a little bit more about Moment Ventures?
Yes. So as you mentioned, we are an early stage VC firm. We're technology based and we're based in Palo Alto. We are investing thematically in early stage companies in the future of work, which of course is, I think, a phrase lots of people have started to use more frequently. We have a very specific definition of it, which is really to find entrepreneurs who are bringing technology to transform other industries that haven't had the prior benefit of those efficiencies. So we will look in industries as far reaching as logistics and food and healthcare and education and the construction, oil and gas, and what have you. But we look for companies, software companies that can bring transformative, behavior and technology into those industries.
That's great. And what types of, can you share a little bit more about what size investments you aim to make, and what types of startups should reach out to Moment Ventures?
Sure. So we invest early stage. So we actually focus on the pre-Series A phase of a company when they're raising funds. So I like to joke that it's sort of in between Uncle Louie and Benchmark. Those that's a broad range, but that's because this phase of company operation is really the most uncertain when companies are sort of building their technology, getting product market fit, and sometimes it can take 3 months to get to that stage, and sometimes it can take 3 years to get to that stage. And what we like to do is we like to help work with the companies and help them get up and running and to the point where they could be ready for a great Series A round to continue scaling their business. And I'm sorry, and we typically invest around $1 million in our first investment. We reserve about half of our fund for follow-ons. And so each fund will have anywhere in between 15 to 20, 25 companies in the fund. We're currently running off of Moment 2, our second fund. It's our first institutional fund. And we're excited to, we're knee deep in the middle of investing right now. So we're excited to work with entrepreneurs.
I love the name of the fund, because you're just, I could just imagine speaking to LPs. You're like, this is the moment. This is it. This is, you have to do it. You're in it to win it. So that's great.
Well, actually, there's a little bit of a hidden joke there, because moment, of course, references the time, and this being your moment, which most people sort of see. That's the reason why we named the company. The really geeky reason why we named the company Moment Ventures is because moment is also a physics term that references the amount of pressure that you place on an object as it rotates around an axis. And so sometimes if you think about like a door hinge, if you push a door on the very wide part of the door, it's sometimes much easier to get the door to swing as opposed to pushing the door right at the hinge. And so the moment of force that's placed on that object is really what gets the thing to turn. So the geeky explanation is that we like to work with entrepreneurs at that phase of the company where things can get sometimes pretty sticky and they need help, and we like to partner with them to help them get through those sticky points.
That's great. That's great. As a fellow engineer, industrial engineer, I love I'm just imagining vectors and movement. So it's good. It's good. It's
a moment of time. This is your moment is perfectly fine too.
That's good. Both. I'm like, oh, okay, this is great. The dual purpose.
Yeah.
Diving back into what you were talking about in defining future of work, and we all know, I'm going to cut right to COVID, where everybody knows we're in the time COVID, we have to have more distance between us. It's forcing us to work differently. Can you share what are you seeing and what are you excited about?
Well, so obviously, COVID is not something any of us had wish on any of us because it's been obviously a very, very difficult phase for everyone, entrepreneurs, investors alike. I think the one thing that COVID has done, because we are now remotely located, we're distributed almost by design. Technology, ends up becoming a necessary utility, if you will, to help facilitate our interaction. And in fact, I imagine that you and I would be meeting in person, conversing had we not been in a COVID environment. But technology can play a role in connecting people. I think the general purpose future of work definition that people speak of when they think of distributed teams or remote work in and of itself, I think that's here to stay. I think we're going to see that become a staple in the way companies are configured in the long run, even after COVID. It just makes too much sense with technology as good as it is now. The area that's a little bit more nuanced that we like to spend more time on is really the general purpose future of work definition is really about the general purpose worker. Anybody who works in a company can benefit from that future of work definition. We look at future of work in addition in markets where you have specialists in these vertical industries, so in education or in construction or in logistics. And how do these workers actually benefit from technology? Many of these industries, logistics, oil and gas, what have you, these are all 100-year-old trillion-dollar industries, and they've all they all work a certain way. They've been working a certain way for decades upon decades. And only until recently could you actually imagine technology playing a central role in transforming how those industries work. I like to remind people that Uber, for example, is going to celebrate their 12th birthday in March next year, which isn't very old if you think about it. I mean, the transportation industry is 100 years old. And what's interesting about a company like Uber and all the other companies that make up that part of the market, they could have gone originally to the taxi cab industry and offered to simply license their software to manage and to help them manage fleets of taxis more efficiently. And if they did that, they could have done that. And if they did, they'd be, a nice, $100 million company or so. And as you know, the rest is history. What they did was they created a complete alternate universe using technology. There's a whole bunch of technology that goes on behind the scenes to facilitate the interaction between drivers and riders, and drivers can make an entire career out of doing this. And the real magic that I think they and their brethren have accomplished is they boiled it all into this app on your phone, right? You push a button and a car shows up in 5 minutes. And it's completely transformed how we view transportation should be. And I honestly don't think we're ever going to go back to a world where that didn't exist. And so I like to remind our entrepreneurs that in 12 short years, they took a couple $100 billion bite out of the market cap of transportation. So what we like to see is we like to look in these other markets, whether it's in logistics or in food or in education, and what other areas could we see technology play a central role in sort of facilitating how the industry works. And if we can find really fundamentally profound ways to improve the industry, well, I think that's going to be really good for the startup, and hopefully that will help, bring this industry forward into, the modern era where I think technology is going to be a staple. It's the utility that we all should benefit from. And so COVID is almost like an accelerant to the way the market has had to adapt and bring on technology as part of their, as part of their infrastructure, if you will.
And are there, I know when we think of healthcare, we have telemedicine, seems obvious with, education, the whole distance learning, and really, I call it the Zoom movement. Everybody's waiting for Zoom number 2 to arrive. But, what are there particular trends that you're looking at in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Zoom has been a terrific success. The company has done a fantastic job in pretty much owning the category. And we can recall the video conferencing, for example, isn't a new industry. It's been around for years and years and years with lots of different companies. And Zoom came in and transformed how we should actually embrace its technology to communicate. And because of that, they became the category winner for this space. Um, I think looking forward, as we look into these other industries, let's just take education, for example. You know, the devil's in the details, right? It's as if you're a parent, you know very well that just putting a computer screen and a teacher on the screen teaching, you know, whatever curriculum for a K through 12 student, there's a whole lot left to be desired than, you know, compared to a classroom where they can actually be physically interacting with their students. Big difference. And I think we're going to see this new school year, we're going to see a you know, profound, you know, a demand that we improve the way we do this. So it's more than just technology, right? We think that technology needs to empower the worker, the specialist in this case, in this case, a teacher, for example. The technology needs to empower the teacher to be able to do what the teacher wants to do best, which is teach. And the technology needs to help facilitate many of the other things. But it has to be done in a way that doesn't bring the teacher, you know, to his or her knees with, you know, a bunch of functions that they weren't necessarily, you know, well suited to administer, right? Teachers aren't necessarily, you know, they didn't become teachers so that they could spend a bunch of time configuring computers and monitoring students on a computer screen and making sure they're paying attention and keeping them engaged. You know, those are things that just, you know, surfaced recently with, you know, with Zoom. And I think we saw a lot of cracks in the way, you know, in the way things worked last year. So I'm actually very optimistic we're going to see all sorts of interesting, you know, innovation coming at us in education and in telehealth for healthcare, in other specialty or industries where video is one component. It basically, you know, is there to help facilitate a conversation or between one or multiple people. But as you know, the devil's in the details. It's really in making sure that we get the most out of those specialists, at the same time get the most efficient interaction with them through technology. So it's really coupling the technology with the person that I think is going to be the secret and the magic for opportunities looking ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I get excited talking about, I mean, I think there's much, um, once you don't get to go to a workplace and interact serendipitously, right, in a physical space, then there's this need in a digital realm to recreate that, right? I was so we were talking about different axes, right? Whether it's like serendipitous time versus structured time, and, you know, like group versus, you know, individual
Yeah.
interaction and work. And there's a number of ways you can look at it. But it's exciting to see what tools will help amplify people. And
Well, and I think the entrepreneurial spirit in all of us, I think we should expect to see some real cool innovation coming as a result of the fact that we are pretty much relegated to at least a Zoom-like environment, remote work environment for the foreseeable future. And I don't think we should expect it to be exactly or as good as what we were doing before. I think we should expect it to be different. And as a result of it being different, let's make it different in a really good way. Let's make it, let's use creativity and in innovative thinking to bring the technology to a point where we can actually benefit from it in a more meaningful way. I mean, and again, as I mentioned, I very much look forward to you know, the distance learning class of next year to be dramatically improved over this year or last year. I fully expect that telehealth, you know, sessions with a nurse or a doctor will be dramatically different than just a FaceTime call with somebody on you know, on your phone or on the screen. And, you know, if you expand that to all the other, you know, vertical, you know, applications that use these kinds of specialists, there's so much work to do. I think we have, you know, decades of innovation to put in place here. which is why I'm excited about investing at this stage, because we are finding entrepreneurs coming from these industries who are just creating some incredible solutions to target these problems. These are entrepreneurs that are actually living, the work, they're basically designing a product for themselves, right? They lived whatever nightmare they're living in the industry, and they're using technology to solve it for the greater good of the industry. And that's fantastic, because I think it's important. I use the example of Uber, for example, transforming transportation. Good for them for doing it. As they probably didn't do it in the most, friendly or straightforward way when they first got going. Going forward, I don't think entrepreneurs are going to have that benefit. They're going to have to work, obviously very cooperatively with big constituents in the industry. And we have to do this in a much more empathetic, logical way, so that we can bring the industry forward using technology, not break a bunch of glass around the industry, so that we eliminate a bunch of jobs, or we dramatically impact people in a negative way. I think we have to use technology in a more thoughtful way, and I think that requires entrepreneurs that have that sense. And we see them out there. It's fantastic having an opportunity to work with them.
That's great. I want to shift gears to hear a little bit more about your story. Sure. I know you founded. You are a founder, right? You founded Moment Ventures, and I know it was you've been going 7 years strong and had multiple funds. Can you share a little bit more about your journey? What inspired you to start it, and how did you become general partner of Moment Ventures?
Sure. Well, so let me start early on. I actually, as you mentioned, I graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in electrical engineering a long time ago. And I actually started my career as an operator. I was primarily a sales and marketing exec at startups. I had the good fortune early in my career to work with a company that actually had a pretty nice run. It was a company called C-Cube Microsystems that actually, you may never have heard of them, but they were very successful because they invented this video algorithm called MPEG, which everyone has heard of today. But back in the day, we were this little technology trying to, get the world to embrace digital video versus analog video. And it was just a super great, successful company. I was a sales and marketing exec at that company. And after a couple of other companies, I was really interested in having an opportunity to move over to the investing side, largely because of all the VCs that I had an opportunity to work with as an entrepreneur. I never really ran into that many VCs that had actually gone through that same phase that I went through, which is be the sales and marketing exec at this zero revenue startup, and then have an opportunity to participate in the growth to an industry leader. So I thought maybe I could find a place at the table for somebody with my skills. There were already, so many VC firms out there and so many smart and awesome people in the industry. I thought that my skill set would actually complement their skill sets very well. And actually, Moment Ventures is actually my second go around. My first go around, I co-founded a venture firm called Formative Ventures back in the 2000s. I had a couple of partners, and we set up an early stage general purpose technology firm. We raised an institutional fund, and I learned a ton about working with early stage entrepreneurs at that company. In and around 2013, I think it was, as we were sort of at the point where we weren't going to raise another fund at Formative due to personal needs of one of my partners wanted to relocate and one wanted to retire. I really wanted to continue doing this here in Silicon Valley. I actually reconnected with a good friend of mine who was going through a similar experience at his venture firm. He was a GP at another firm. And we got together and started talking about, would there be an opportunity to create a new firm that could invest thematically? So we had this common interest in this future of work articulation that I just mentioned. And we thought, this will be an interesting time to actually create a fund exclusively focused on this kind of startup. And I think we're not going to run out of opportunities to invest in. I think there's going to be a ton of innovation in all these other industries using technology. And so we put up our shingle. We actually started off by using our own money to invest in startups. And then we started raising a little bit of money from high net worth friends, if you will. And we created our first fund in 2015, which is a small fund. And we were just finding deals and investing as much as we could. That fund actually has gone pretty well, and that led us to the opportunity to raise Fund 2, which is our first institutional fund. It allowed us to raise this fund, bring on some terrific institutional investors, and hopefully we can continue doing this for a while, because I think, look, I mean, if you take industries like oil and gas or logistics and food, I can't tell you whether or not that industry is going to go through this huge inflection point in the next 1 year or 2 years. But I can tell you that every one of those industries is very likely to transform over the next 10 years. So if that's the case, what better time than to start a venture firm focused on this? And our job is to really to find the right companies that go through the inflection point at the right time. And so that's what we're chartered to go and do. And we've, we're about, a little past halfway in Fund 2. And we found, a bunch of interesting companies, and we're super excited about what else is out there.
That's great. And can you share a little bit more about, I mean, you've gotten to invest in such amazing companies. How does that happen? Is it purely Palo Alto? What's your, if you're sharing some of the investors, of course they have to know you and you have to get into the deal, but if you can share a little bit more on advice for other emerging fund managers and also angels.
Sure. So first of all, we're based in Silicon Valley for a reason. We actually think that if your company is based in Silicon Valley, obviously there's a great match for having a local investor. If your company is actually not based in Silicon Valley, it's still good to actually have an investing partner that's based here, largely because the greater technology ecosystem is right here in our backyard. We've got a wealth of the educational institutions based around here, Stanford and UC Berkeley, and also the larger financial ecosystem is very strong here in Silicon Valley, and all the larger VC firms are based here as well. So we actually don't have a geographic preference in the companies that we invest in. In fact, in our latest fund, 60% of the companies we've invested in are actually not based in the Bay Area. We do sort of constrain our focus to US and Canada, maybe Mexico if the right opportunity comes our way, but we'd like to be sort of on a similar time zone to the companies we invest in. And because of this, this future work distributed team environment, we're finding some really interesting company configurations getting set up right now. One of the more recent companies we invested in, is based in Toronto, Canada, and it's actually one of the first companies we invested in where we actually haven't met the team in person. We did a ton of Zoom work together, but we got to know them on through Zoom sessions. We actually did a bunch of things that I think were unusual to try to get beyond the glass in a way to get to know each other a little bit more intimately, if you will. And in fact, in that case, it wasn't super straightforward because one of the co-founders at the time that COVID hit was actually at a customer site in India, and he got stuck there. So he got quarantined in India, and we were doing due diligence on their seed round while one of the founders was in Toronto, and one of the founders was stuck in a hotel room in India, and we were in Palo Alto. And in that case, actually, I think Zoom played a great role in connecting us in a way where we could have great communication with each other and get to know each other in a really interesting way. And I think that's going to be a way of the future. So I fully expect that we'll continue to see teams, located wherever, and that'll be great.
And what are some of the things you do to do due diligence virtually, since you can't see the teams, like to get, as you mentioned, like to get to the next level of intimacy, or see them a
Yeah,
little bit beyond
it's
just the presentation.
well, obviously, when you're on a Zoom call with certainly more than one party, if it's beyond just, let's say, you and me, if there were two other people on the Zoom call, we could really only have one ongoing conversation at a time. And that makes it efficient, but it doesn't make it very personal. So one of the things that we did do that I actually really liked was we actually asked to have a Zoom session at night on a Friday night with the team, and it was Friday night for us in Toronto, not necessarily Friday night for India, but we had and it was essentially an opportunity to get to speak to each other and converse outside of business hours. And the rules of the game of the session was that we can't talk about work. We can't talk about your company. Don't want to talk about that. Don't want to talk about work. We just want to talk about each other and have a nice cocktail hour, if you will. And it was great because we had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about each other. So we got to learn a lot about the entrepreneurs themselves, but I also think equally as important is the entrepreneurs had an opportunity to get to know us more personally, got to know each other and what our family makeups were, and some of the things that surround our professional lives. And I think that really brings it home when you realize that we're all going through this together. We all got families we have to take care of, and we're family people, and it was nice to be able to do that. But by changing the setting to a nighttime venue and not talking about work, got to talk about soccer and talk about other sports that we had interests and we had in common, and it was really great. And to this day, I'm grateful that we had that opportunity. I actually don't think if we weren't in shelter in place, I actually don't think we would have gotten to know them as well, largely because they would be already have been located 3,000 miles away. How many times could we physically go see them before we make an investment? Probably once. And so in that one visit, would you really have an opportunity to get to know them that well? I don't think so. So you sort of make the best of the situation and hopefully even thrive because of that situation. One other thing is, you asked earlier, Sergio, about where do we find these companies and how do we find entrepreneurs that are doing these kinds of things. So the way we look at the future of work is, I call them a lens. We look at a company through a lens that we've described in the future of work. And there are three different types of companies that we look for. And when they present their companies, if we can sort of put it in context of how we see it, that becomes really interesting. So actually, of all the deals that we've invested in, I'd say about half the companies we've invested in were introduced to us through some common third party, whether it's another entrepreneur or another investor or somebody in the industry or some personal friend that we know. And I would say the other half of companies we've invested in are ones that we found largely through looking through these industries through these lenses, right? And looking at and looking for companies that are doing interesting things in a particular industry. For example, recently I was looking in the mental health industry, which obviously is a huge issue right now, and I think it's going to be one of the bigger, trends that we have to, solve using technology in a much better way. And I was spending a bunch of time on that, and I ended up meeting a terrific entrepreneurial pair who created a company based down in Los Angeles, and we had an opportunity to really get to know each other. And I really liked their perspective on things. And one of the reasons why is because one of the co-founders was a licensed mental health therapist. She knew what we don't know about being in the mental health industry. So I like to say that the two entrepreneurs and a dog in San Jose aren't necessarily going to know all the nuances of how the mental health industry works. And in that case, yeah, she knew some of the things that I think were really important to put in place for her company. And I don't think the other companies in the space have figured out how to do that. And that for that reason, they became really interesting to us. And we've gotten to know them quite well recently. And we're super excited about what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like for us during the summer we had a number of interns with
Yeah,
RBL1, and it was a similar. We had Zoom sessions where we would the same thing. We had digital happy hours and integrated. They said in the beginning it drove them crazy, but I we would do like icebreaker questions all
yeah.
the time. And in the beginning, they're like, "Oh my god, I don't know how I can do this." And then at the end, they were said, "You know, we got to we." They're like, um, I felt I got to know what is it? I felt I had work colleagues, right? Like I actually
Yeah.
got to know people beyond just the person I just talked to on Zoom, which is it's hard to it's hard to do. uh,
Yeah, and so we're excited about all of this, but at the same time, we know that there really is no replacement for in person. Um, and I look very much forward to the day where we can go somewhat back to that as a normal state of building a relationship. Where I do actually think technology is very interesting. I think the Zoom call has kind of made the phone call a bit obsolete, largely because now I don't know about you, like when I get on a conference call now that's not video based, I find it a little bit clunky
yep,
and awkward, and
it feels impersonal almost. It's like
very
yep,
impersonal. And it's very interesting. Before COVID, there were many times where we would have company pitches on the phone, right, through a
yep.
conference call, not through video. And I always wondered why we would do that, because I would always, hang up the phone after the call, and it's just really hard to get a sense of, the entrepreneur behind the company, right? And as you know, the entrepreneur is everything in these companies. They're the ones who you're really, banking on to figure everything out, and it's really hard to get to know them without the video element to it. So again, I think in person coupled with Zoom type technology is sort of the way of the future. It'll be a combination of those two. I do look forward to the day where I can, hopefully safely get on an airplane and go visit our companies or have them come visit us and see each other in real life. Until then, we're going to keep it safe and do it this way, which is fine. Oh,
I feel like I have a question that you have a unique lens to answer because you're in Silicon Valley, you focus on the future of work.
right.
How do you think with the exodus of talent and distribution of talent, although it's like two things are happening, right? At least in the Valley, right? Valley's been a historical epicenter for entrepreneurship because of the density of talent that
Right.
is changing now slightly um, and then also the density of capital because of the all the investors that are there. How do you see that changing in the formation of ventures, if at all?
Well, it's interesting. I think if a company has it in its mind to be remote and distributed from day one, in other words, we're going to build our team and it's going to be 100% distributed from the get go, and we can, our development team doesn't have to be in the same room together. They can work collaboratively through online technologies and what have you. Then I think then you can kind of do whatever you want, right? You can build your company, you can hire people wherever it makes sense. Or if, for example, if one of your, high paid talent wants to move to, New Mexico or Maine or wherever else, you can manage that. The onus is on you as the entrepreneur to figure that out and make it work.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if there's a critical component in the way your company is made up where you need collaboration um, amongst teams, whether it's the development team or any other operational part of your company. And when COVID or when shelter in place kind of is behind us, or we go back to some form of normalcy and teams will start to congregate again in groups, well, then I think it's important to keep geography in mind, right? I mean, I think there might be a day where you're going to want to establish another, location or a headquarters location in a certain area where you can amass a concentration of talent. So, first of all, I think this whole mass exodus out of Silicon Valley or San Francisco, I think it's a little bit overrated. I don't think it's happening as prominently as everybody says. Certainly, there is some of that going on right now, but again, because of the prevalence of talent through the universities that are located here, the other startups that are located here. I mean, I remember years ago we had a company in San Diego, which is a fantastic technology market. We had this company that was going through a management change, and we actually had to find a new CEO for the company. And this was a company in the telecommunications space, which San Diego was super, strong at. And we were looking for entrepreneurs who could be candidates for that job in San Diego. I mean, like we struggled to come up with 5 candidates that we could interview to even look at this position. If that company was based in Silicon Valley, you'd have, 50 candidates within a mile from the company that we could vet and evaluate. So again, if your company is going to be geographically critical, then I think it's important that that you don't forget that and don't handicap yourself by getting too distributed too quickly. But if your company is going to be distributed from day one and you're signing up for building a team that way, then so be it. I get it. It makes sense. As I mentioned, 60% of our companies are based out of the area. And but I'm really glad that we're an investment partner for them, because we can be there, at least if they don't have a location here, we can be sort of their eyes and ears here in Silicon Valley. We can be a home base for them if they need to ever spend time out here. So I think it'll be an interesting trend going forward. We'll see where that goes, but I do worry a little bit about companies that have set up shop in a remote area just because they can, and then if the market goes back, it'll be interesting to see if they can continue to build their team with the same kind of momentum, and can they amass the talent that they need to get to continue building the company. Remains to be seen.
Awesome. Thank you, Clint, for that insight. And thank you for giving us, so much of your time tonight. So everyone that's watching, this is Clint Chao, GP of Moment Ventures. So thank you for sharing your time with us, and tune in Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. To hear from more amazing VCs. So thank you, Clint, for sharing.
Yeah, I really appreciate taking the time. And if anybody needs to contact me, our website is momentventures.com. And you can send me a note at clint@momentventures.com if you have an interesting company. And Sergio, thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
No, pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care.